so terrified looking into these big black eyes and these little creatures.
UFOs are sighted by all kinds of people.
Well, about 60% of the people around here, I think, have seen something.
It's really, really disturbing to be in a room with something that isn't supposed to exist.
Their head being opened up, something being done to their brain, and being put back together again.
That light meant that those things were about to show up.
They opened my back. I knew my back was open because I could feel it.
There is the experience of being taken or leaving this dimension.
We have hundreds and thousands of people who are coming forward and saying that the abduction phenomenon has happened to them.
I'm the first to admit that it all just sounds outrageous. It all sounds just crazy, and yet the evidence is there behind it.
She asked me, did I want to meet Bud Hopkins? I said, who's he?
You ready?
Yep.
Bill, well, thanks for agreeing to the interview. First of all, a little bit about your background. You had extensive military service for many years prior to 1970, where a certain aspect of that military service kicked upstairs, so you were able to see certain things that you were not able to see beforehand. Would you tell us a little bit about...
I went into the Air Force. I was in the Strategic Air Command for 4 years. I had a secret security clearance. While I left the Air Force, I went into the Navy, which is really where I wanted to be in the first place. I'd always had this tremendous feeling and connection with the ocean. I was an excellent swimmer. But I decided after I had gone through the Air Force experience that, sick or not, I was going to go in the Navy because that's really what I had wanted to do. So I did. Volunteered for submarine duty and was assigned to the USS Tyru, SS-416, which was a diesel-electric boat, World War II type, that had been reconfigured. While we were on a transit from the Portland-Seattle area on the surface, I actually saw, I was the port lookout, and I saw the most incredible thing that I think I've ever seen in my life. And it had such a profound effect upon my view of the universe and the world that we live in, that I wish everybody could experience this. I saw come up out of the ocean, from beneath the surface of the sea, a huge disc-shaped craft about the size of a Midway-class aircraft carrier, which is tremendous in size. Even though that's one of our smallest carriers, or was then, it's still a huge, tremendously big object. Came up out of the ocean and rose into the air and tumbled on its axis and went up into the clouds, and I was awestruck, dumbstruck. And I mean dumbstruck literally. I could not utter a sound. And my first impulse was to tell the officer of the deck that I'd seen a flying saucer, and then luckily for me I couldn't talk because on second thought that's not what I really wanted to say, because I didn't want to be the only Looney Tunes character on a submarine with a tight-knit crew that you had to live in close quarters with, because that's a hell of a way to live. So I told the officer deck that I'd seen something about 15 degrees off the port bow at a relative distance of about 2.5 nautical miles. And he began to look in that area. And the starboard lookout had heard me tell him this, and he began to look over there. And while we were all three watching, either the same craft or another one exactly like it came down out of the clouds, tumbled again on its, why it did this maneuver, I don't know, but every single time it did it. It's like it came down in this attitude, and then it flipped over, and then entered the water. And the water just appeared to open up in front of it. It's just like the account in the Bible about the parting of the Red Sea. That's exactly what happened. The sea actually parted, and this thing went into the water, and it closed up behind it. And this big spray went up into the air. But it wasn't a spray from the craft hitting the water. It was a spray from the water coming back in to fill up this hole that had been created. And again, I'm thinking, this is incredible. What are we looking at here? And it was metal. It was a machine, and it wasn't glowing or anything like that. It didn't have any lights on it that we could see. But it was obviously metal, and it was obviously a machine. And although I can't tell you that there was anyone inside of it, I believe that there was. And it did something that, as far as I knew, was absolutely impossible. I'd been in the Air Force. I'd worked on the state-of-the-art of our aviation capabilities, and here I was on the deck of a submarine in the conning tower, and I knew what we had to be able to have to go underwater, and I knew that the two were incompatible. Here's something that came from under the water and flew in the air and performed maneuvers, and then came back down and interfaced with the water at tremendous speed and remained intact, which realistically it never touched the water. The water sort of magically opened up in front of it, but something had to interface with that water. Anything that we had that interfaced with the water in that manner would have been disintegrated. It's like hitting a brick wall. So I was looking at a technology that, as far as our laws of physics and what we knew at that time, didn't exist. This was in 1966. Ensign Ball was as shocked as I was. He called the captain to the bridge. He came up with the chief quartermaster, who brought a camera. And we all stood there and watched this occur over and over again for about 10 minutes. And I still, to this day, don't know if it was the same craft or a whole bunch of different craft going in and out of the water. But it seemed like that there was a hell of a lot of traffic on that freeway right there. And we were watching it as we went by. We never changed course. We never lowered or increased our speed. We made no attempt to communicate or signal. We made no attempt to get closer. And eventually, it just stopped. We were told not to discuss it with anyone, not even amongst ourselves, which was incredible. I never had been told anything like that in my life. You can't talk about something. And to be told that we couldn't even talk about it amongst ourselves was even more extraordinary, I thought. But we didn't talk about it. When we got to Pearl Harbor, all the time the chief quartermaster was taking pictures of this. So I know photographs were made. What happened to those photographs, I have no idea. But when we reached Pearl Harbor, we were not allowed to go ashore to go on liberty, even though we didn't have the duty. And about 2 hours after we berthed at the submarine base, a commander from the Office of Naval Intelligence came on board and debriefed each one of us individually in the captain's stateroom. And the ultimate outcome of the debriefing was that we didn't see anything, we didn't hear anything, and we had to read rules and regulations that told us that if we ever talked about what it was that we didn't see, that we could be imprisoned, we could be fined $10,000, we could lose all pay and allowances due or ever to become due. And I learned at that moment that the United States Navy didn't want anybody to know about what we saw, and that severe consequences could come down around the neck of anybody who did. And that was when I understood fully that, yeah, there's a real cover-up. These things do exist, number one, And at least the United States Navy doesn't want anybody to know about it. And there's stiff penalties for anybody who bucks that.
I'm freaking out. I'm like, what the heck is this? So I continue, and it's going over these trees. By the time I get here toward the left turn lane, I duck into this left turn lane here, and I stop right about here.
5 police officers saw an object over southern Illinois that night.
It's definitely coming this way. There's no doubt about it. This is weird.
I believe that the object that I saw was extraterrestrial.
These objects would hover, they would dart very quickly one way or the other.
I'd never seen anything like that.
It was so shiny, it looked like someone was shining a very bright light on a piece of aluminum.
The craft is disc-shaped, probably bigger than a 747, and it arced over the top of our car.
Then there was a third object even behind the first 2.
So it came across and just stopped. It went back the direction it came from. This light went like this. That forever gave me the view that something other than us was out in the world.
Why they're here, where they're from, you can only speculate.
And after a count of about 4 seconds, gone.
We're probably missing.
More than 40 million Americans say they have seen or know someone who has seen an unidentified flying object, a UFO.
Object.
I have seen alien vehicles on 8 occasions since then.
At 8:30 p.m. that night, hundreds of people reported seeing a mysterious flying something.
And all at once, these 6 or 7 lights came across the top of the hill, and it was moving very slow. And then I went in and jokingly said to my wife, "We got a UFO coming over." She just couldn't believe what she seen. And then, of course, she didn't know what she seen.
Scared you, is that right?
Yes.
What scared you?
The noise.
What noise?
The noise that we heard in the air.
You heard a noise in the
Yes.
air? What was it like? Like a roar or a buzz or a hum, or what kind of a noise?
It was like someone was blowing a flute. It was scary myself.
It was scary because you saw something yourself?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
I saw little object hovering. It was quite big actually, and then there was little ones all around it. We saw something silver, and then we quickly ran to the logs, and we saw a silver thing.
They came running up here in such a panic, and I mean, even if we had staged it, they could not have run all together like that. Even if we practiced it, I don't know how many times. But they came up here like a living snake. And they just came, we were in a staff meeting, and we just heard them screaming, ah, and they were here, you know, and a child can't make that up.
I was very skeptical in the beginning as well. I believed that they'd seen something, but I wasn't prepared to accept that it was anything supernatural or anything like that. But I think the consistency of what's been going on indicates that it was more than I was prepared to admit in the beginning.
So both of them were running. One was running in the trees, and the other one was running across the ship, because there were also trees here.
It was spotted almost a year ago, an unidentified flying object in the skies over Southern California. And exactly what it was remains a mystery.
Welcome. Thank you all for coming. I speak for all of my family in appreciating the effort you've made to come and touch us, to be with us, to share with us in appreciation of my dad, my father, John Mack. You're his friends.
John Mack was a distinguished psychiatric doctor and one of the most respected professors at Harvard University. John Mack died in a car accident in September 2004. Today, the scientific community at Harvard, and also his colleagues, family, and friends, are bidding him a last farewell and a solemn tribute. John Mack treated some of the many people around the world who claimed to have been abducted by extraterrestrials. After working for years with several hundred of them, he caused an uproar when he revealed that these people were not crazy, but were telling the truth.
The person is in the car or sleeping, and then there's a light, these entities come into the room, they feel themselves paralyzed, they're moved, they're taken, they go into a ship, something happens there, there may be other people there, they have telepathic communication with the aliens, there's some probing, there's a whole complicated set of events that takes place, which is consistent from one person to another. But there's a basic story here that after several hundred cases in this country and in many other countries, it all begins to hold together as something that has a very robust kind of truth to it. And if this is real, then what does that mean?
John Edward Mack was born in New York on October 4th, 1929. In 1955, John graduated from Harvard Medical School. He married Sally Stahl in 1959. In the late 60s, he founded the Cambridge Psychiatric Hospital and would rapidly secure it a worldwide reputation. In 1972, he became a full professor of psychiatry at Harvard University. 1977 was a turning point in John's career. He was awarded the Pulitzer Prize for his biography of Lawrence of Arabia. When he treated his first experiences, John had had almost 40 years of professional psychiatric practice. In 1994, his conclusions about alien abduction phenomena caused a scandal, yet they would be supported by many other medical teams. He wrote that the reported abductions were not hallucinations, nor were they schizophrenia, psychosis, or any other mental condition. He stated these abductions were not dreams. The abductees were sincere, they had nothing to gain, and were aware of the absurd nature of their experiences. Amazingly, they had all told the same story, down to the slightest detail.
I saw these four beings, creatures, whatever you want to call them. Basically, I like there's something different, other species, other than us. Came into the room. I don't know how they got in the house. I mean, it seemed like they came right through. I couldn't move, and then I was freaking out. I mean,
Sunday night, David's in bed, it's 11 o'clock, this is, these are my pictures that are on the wall, this is the color of my rug, I know that I'm awake. And I stepped into the kitchen, and Danny was standing there. He was 13. And he was standing like a robot. I mean, his hands were really down like this against his side, and his eyes were really big, and he looked so scared. And I stepped toward him, and I remember thinking, my God, he's paralyzed with fear. That's the thought that went through my mind. And I stepped toward him, and I put my hands out to him, and I said, sweetie, they won't hurt you. They won't hurt you. You'll be okay. They won't hurt you. And it was like he couldn't even hear me. He didn't look at me. His eyes were just like straight ahead. And the light was all around us at that time. And I walked past him and pulled in behind him, stepped in behind him. And just as I stepped in behind him, I could see Jake coming in the other door into the kitchen. And I remember thinking I was so angry because I thought, they've been messing with me my whole life. Don't mess with my kids. But there was nothing I could do.
in the room filled with the blue light. For a moment I thought to myself, is this a gas leak? Is this a gas explosion? Is there a fire? Followed immediately by the fear of they're coming. And I tried to shove myself underneath the bed, tried to hide, tried to squirrel myself away because there was nowhere in this small room to hide. And then sure enough, door opens up and these two beings scurry in, and one touches my leg, very physical, touches my leg, and I knew that that light meant that those things were about to show up.
A couple of years into my experience, when I was sitting in a room somewhere, I don't know if it was a ship, I don't know if it was another place, in another point in time. It was very quiet, the lighting was very dim, and an elder being brought in. It was either 3 or 4 of these little beings, and they looked very sort of bluish in color. And they walked over to me and stood in front of me. They couldn't have been much bigger than this. They were quite young still. And I remember one being here and touching the seat that I was on, and another one was touching my legs, and another one touching my legs, and another one over here. And I looked to the being who had brought them in with this question on my face, and the being communicated that they were mine. It's sad to be separated from them. And yet there's nothing I can do. I'm just here. I'm not in control of it at this point in time. All I can do is continue to seek to understand it. If I could go visit them, I would.
They describe these experiences or these events like a person talks about something that has happened to them. And when you're talking with a psychotic who's telling you something and it's a delusion and you feel that it really didn't happen, I can tell. I mean, I know this is something that a person wants me to believe, or they're frightened, or they're distorting reality in some way. There's nothing like that here. These are people of sound mind, by and large, telling me something that's they know that I might think they're crazy, and so they're a little concerned about telling me, and they're very full of questioning themselves and doubt, and I mean and then they describe something very real and intense, a light or something happened to their body, or it's the whole quality of the way they talk about it is the way a person talks about experience that happened to them.
The alien abduction phenomena has been subject of research in America for over 30 years. I went down to New York to find the first man to spur interest in this field. John introduced me to him last year.
This woman, Blanche, was a psychologist, and she asked me, did I want to meet Bud Hopkins? And I said, who's he? She said, well, he's an artist in New York who works with people who have had the experience of being taken by aliens into spaceships. And I thought this was absolutely crazy. This was too far out for me. She said, no, it's very real. You should go meet him. So I went to see him. There were several of the people were there. And I was struck by the fact that they were very regular people, ordinary people, except that they had extraordinary experiences, you know. And that was mind-blowing for me.
Bud Hopkins lives in downtown Manhattan. He first heard about the phenomenon of extraterrestrial abduction in 1975. He's the one who first published books on alien abduction. Since then, he's analyzed hundreds of new cases.
Well, the UFO abduction phenomenon came to public attention in 1966 with the Betty and Barney Hill case. But I have cases that date back to the 1920s, so we have no idea how long it's been going on. But essentially, this is what happens. The UFO craft have occupants, beings, who seem to be essentially interested in human beings as objects of study. What generally happens during an abduction is that the person is paralyzed, generally then sees the approach of small figures with large heads. It's extremely terrifying at that point for virtually everybody, naturally. That person or persons are then lifted up a beam of light, we have no idea how this works, into a craft, taken inside. They are still paralyzed, unable to do anything. And then a series of physical examinations take place which concentrate attention on the brain, the reproductive system, and the central nervous system. The conscious memory is pretty much suppressed. Not totally, but pretty much suppressed, so the person has sections of the memory but not the whole story, and is totally confused. Did this really happen? Am I going crazy? Etc. But one of the most important things to realize is that the person is taken again and again through his or her lifetime. In other words, this isn't just a one-time thing. It's as if that person has become an object of very systematic study by the UFO occupants. It's interesting to see how similar they are. They were totally separately drawn, different places, different times.
It's true that now we are very used to this kind of figure.
Now we're familiar. That's the thing. But not at the time these things were done. This is interesting.
This is scary.
Because they don't look muscular and powerful and threatening. They look skinny and weak. But the terror, I think, comes from the fact that when people look at them, they don't know what's going on in those minds. They don't understand what those figures are thinking. I want nothing more in the world than for people with scientific credentials that are extensive, and especially mental health professionals, to get into this and take it very seriously. No matter what their opinion is. They can start out thinking there's nothing to it. I don't care. If you're interested enough just to look into it, that's all I'm asking. So I was extremely pleased when John did it, and it was very daring of him. It was a very daring thing. It was very helpful.
So the first part of it starts out as they meet us, as they meet the experiencer in this density, and it's that dense. But then there is the experience of being taken or leaving this dimension. And in the leaving of this dimension, things don't feel so dense, and they don't feel so dense. It feels like the vibration shifts, that everything speeds up. It feels like the body becomes light. And for me specifically, it felt like my cells were being pulled apart, and that the speed of everything moved up, like things were moving much quicker.
So when I turned to face them, I was just going to fight, I was going to defend myself. And I couldn't move until that point, I was frozen with fear. And when I turned to face them, that's when the one closest to me had this rod-like device. It started coming toward me as I was turning to face them, toward this way. His arm was coming toward my neck, and as I could see it coming toward me, and it was coming fast. And it was almost like time slowed down in that second because my whole life, just because I thought I was going to die. I thought that was, whatever that was coming toward me was going to kill me. And my whole life flashed before my eyes. And then it hit my neck, and then I just lost my whole body froze. I couldn't feel it anymore. And I felt, it made a sound. It was electrical, some kind of electrical, I don't know how like an electrical buzzing sound. And then it seemed like it shut my body down systematically, my physical body, and then my mind, and then like system by system. It felt like it shut my whole body down.
And that's the last thing that I remember. Everything after that was like a dream. It just got like really, you know, like in a dream where things, you know, out of sequence, and I knew I wasn't in my home. I didn't know where I was, but I could hear Danny screaming, and I was just like trying to hit something. I remember it was just really crazy. And then the next thing that I remember was waking up the next morning, waking up in bed, and David was there. And when I woke up, I laid awake for a few minutes, and I thought it had to have been a dream. So he said, you did get up. He said, and I did speak to you. You were walking around the end of the bed, and he said, I asked you where you were going, and you said that Maui was crying and that you were going downstairs. He said, I tried to get up, and I couldn't move because it was like I was paralyzed, and something was pushing down on me, and everything went black, and I couldn't remember anything after that. And I remember feeling such total helpless fear.
I will be in bed, and I will somehow sense fear. I'll sense something in the room, and at some point I can't move.
I couldn't move my head left or right, but I could kind of look down at the foot of the bed, and I saw people standing at the foot of my bed.
I see these eyes are just looking right through me. And then I don't remember anything. I woke up the following morning.
Skin, very dry to the touch. And I don't really remember how, but suddenly we were sort of floating.
They brought me in front of a being that was so horrifying that I'll never be able to, you know, put it out of my memory. It was very tall, probably about 7 foot tall.
Very tall and very thin and very scary, and sometimes almost like an insect.
And exactly at that moment, I became paralyzed.
And they came over to me, two at my feet, two at my head.
They opened my back. I knew my back was open because I could feel.
You find yourself on a table, and these creatures around you with instruments.
Oh, this is Dr. Kurzweil, Stephen Kurzweil. He called me up one time and said, Bill, you're never going to believe this. I said, well, first place, tell me who are you? I don't even know who you are. He said, I'm a dentist, or excuse me, a doctor in New York City. And I was recruited by Bud Hopkins, who's one of the so-called well-known abductee researchers who writes books about this stuff, to be a member of a research team to record the progression of mind control experiments on people to make them think they've been abducted by aliens. And the guy that recruited me is Bud Hopkins, who's identified himself to me and shown me his identification as being an agent of the Central Intelligence Agency. And I said, well, are you going to do it? He said, well, I already did it. And when I saw how these people were being treated and then just dumped out in the street, not knowing what happened to them, and having their minds all screwed up by these people, I objected, and now they're trying to take my medical license away. Hold up.
What you talking about, mister?
Oh, this is Dr. Kurzweil, Stephen Kurzweil. He called me up one time and said, Bill, you're never going to believe this. I said, well, first place, tell me who are you? I don't even know who you are. He said, I'm a dentist, or excuse me, a doctor in New York City. And I was recruited by Bud Hopkins, who's one of the so-called well-known abductee researchers who writes books about this stuff, to be a member of a research team to record the progression of mind control experiments on people to make them think they've been abducted by aliens. And the guy that recruited me is Bud Hopkins, who's identified himself to me and shown me his identification as being an agent of the Central Intelligence Agency. And I said, well, are you going to do it? He said, well, I already did it. And when I saw how these people were being treated and then just dumped out in the street, not knowing what happened to them, and having their minds all screwed up by these people, I objected, and now they're trying to take my medical license away. So he sent me all the paperwork for the Medical Board of New York City and all this kind of stuff, and the testimony and everything. And I investigated it, and I sent a whole stack of research that I had to the medical board and sent them a copy of my book. And we managed to save this man's license and prove that Bud Hopkins is a member of the Central Intelligence Agency. And there's Stephen Kurzweil's affidavit. And this is all on record in the state of New York for anybody who wants to investigate it. Read that. It's incredible. And it just verifies what I wrote in my book, that everybody at the top of the pyramid in the ufology movement are all Central Intelligence Agency operatives, including Stanton T. Friedman, Bruce Maccabee, who has already admitted after I named him as a CIA agent, and everybody said, Bill Cooper's full of crap, he's calling everybody CIA. Bruce Maccabee then admitted that on a regular basis he gave briefings to the higher echelon of the Central Intelligence Agency on what's happening in the UFO movement. John Lear has admitted that he has been a member of the Central Intelligence Agency for most of his life, flew drugs for Air America in and out of the Golden Triangle in Southeast Asia, and still works for a CIA proprietary airlines based out of Las Vegas, Nevada. And on and on and on and on and on. I could go on and on and on. It's incredible.
Dr. Stephen Greer heads up the Disclosure Project, a group that compiles information from people who say they've encountered extraterrestrial forms of life.
When I put these briefings together, Lawrence Rockefeller hosted the Clintons at his ranch. He was one of the old Rockefeller guys, and he wanted the truth out, but his brother David Rockefeller chased Manhattan Bank.
closet door opened up, and a reptile alien stepped out. And she said he had to bend down to get under the header, and he stood up.
Please, no!